This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, this is Valerie Worthington, and this is number 6 of a series of informal conversations I've been fortunate enough to have with friends of mine whom I know through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and who also are doing amazing things outside of the gym. And in these times where we can't train with each other and spend the kind of time that we're used to spending together, I have been reaching out to my friends and asking them to share their expertise in areas that are relevant to all of us in the time of COVID. And today I get to chat with my dear friend Lisa Ivy. Lisa, you and I met through Jiu-Jitsu, and over that time, I've had the opportunity to watch you and your love of animals. In the time that I've known you, you've always loved animals. You've always been committed to helping them. And now you work at the Animal Refuge League of Greater Portland in Maine, and you have graciously agreed to come and talk about how the experience has been for you of trying to shelter animals during a pandemic. So thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you do professionally, and what is a typical day like pre-pandemic?
So I am the operations support specialist. It was a position created a few years ago to help support two different teams, the foster team and the transport team. They both needed additional help, but neither one of them necessarily needed a full-time person. And so I work within both of those teams, which actually those teams work really closely together because a lot of times we are looking to foster our transport animals. Um, the way transporting into Maine works is that we will bring animals from southern states into our state, and we have state laws that require a quarantine period because we want to make sure that the animals don't have any kind of infectious disease. So a lot of the times we're looking to foster the animals during that quarantine period so that they're not having to sit in the shelter. So that's how those groups work really closely together. So in the past, I work a full-time position. It's a desk job, but it also has a fair amount of animal care. There's some driving too, but I help to coordinate transports of animals both within the state, from southern states, and from Puerto Rico. Um, Sometimes the animals are transported by van, sometimes they are flown in. And we even have a volunteer who has his own van who will drive to northern Maine to get transports of cats for us. When they come to us, we have a system for bringing them in, getting them examined, getting them any medical care or treatment that they might need. Uh, for dogs, we do behavioral assessment. We might send them out to foster. It might be a quick turnaround and they stay on campus, and then they go available and they're adopted, and we're able to find animals for our community and then also help alleviate the stress on the southern communities. And the foster end of that is working directly with the foster animals as their first line of contact. So getting the animals to them, answering any questions that they might have, behavior, medical, anything like that. We also can pass on the information if we don't have it, but we are the first line of contact for the foster animals.
Thank you so much. And you've put together a really cute slideshow of some awesome uh, animals. So here we go. Here's a new buddy, at
There's
least for
absolutely
me.
no information in this slideshow whatsoever. It's literally just so you don't have to look at my face the whole time.
I love that. So every time we have an exchange, I'm going to change it so that everybody can look at these awesome animals. So speaking of animals, do you just get dogs and cats at the shelter, or is it a variety of animals?
We have a variety of animals, but we typically only transport dogs and cats. There have been some exceptions to that if there's some sort of like natural disaster or hoarding case where we have, for example, taken in some rodents, some rats and mice and things like that. But typically it's just cats and dogs, but we will accept any pets as surrender. So we have rabbits, guinea pigs, birds of various kinds, ferrets, we will take anything we think we can reasonably care for. So we don't do farm animals. But if somebody calls us up and says, I have a snake, I need to surrender it, we will do our best to take care of it and place it.
You will take the snake. So awesome. Okay, so here is another set of awesome, cute buddies. Whoops, there we go.
So
And
all of the animals that I've used for the slideshow are either animals that I've fostered or animals that I've worked really closely with in the shelter. So they happen to be prevalent on my phone or in
yeah,
my Google Photos.
well, and they're absolutely precious. So I'm glad that people have something else to look at besides my face, although your face is spectacular. So you described what a typical day is like for you, or what your responsibilities have been pre-COVID, and I'm wondering if you can share a little bit or a lot about how your role has changed since the pandemic has started and the quarantining has started.
So one of the most dramatic changes is that unfortunately we have halted transports. So the transport leg of my job has been significantly curtailed, uh, but we have ramped up fostering because we want as many animals who are either available for adoption or not available for adoption to be in foster as possible, not only for the health of the animals, but also, looking forward to the potential of any of our direct care employees being affected by the virus. The fewer animals on campus, the easier that will be to deal with. Luckily, we haven't seen it yet, but it's always a possibility. The other major change is that in an effort to minimize the potential for any exposure to spread amongst our direct care and other on-site employees, we've split our shifts into half-day shifts. So the morning crew is always the morning crew, and the PM crew is always the PM crew. So there's a huge number of coworkers that I'm not going to see, for the foreseeable future. I work from 8 to 12 at the shelter, and then when I go home, I'm either working on projects or I'm available for phone and email if needed, but I'm only on site from 8 to 12. And then one of the other huge differences is that we are closed to the public, and we have some pretty significant protocols in place for sanitizing, protecting ourselves, protecting our volunteers. So we're still doing adoptions, but it's by appointment only. The people are not coming into the building. Staff, as far as the number of people in and out of the building, it's quite reduced. So those would be the biggest changes I would say that I feel in my everyday job.
Thank you. So on to the next adorable picture. And another question for you. You mentioned that fostering, the applications for fostering have increased significantly, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what accounts for that and what the implications are for you and for the shelter.
So I think nationwide applications have increased because people are at home 24 hours a day and they have time to do it, and they want to do something significant with their time. So they're offering themselves as available. And also for them, particularly people who live alone and are now in their homes by themselves, they might really need that contact. But coincidentally, for our own shelter, just before all of this went down, we had expressed to our community engagement person that we were starting to feel low on foster numbers, and could we put out a public blast to start bringing more foster families on board. So coincidentally, we timed a public blast for fosters with this COVID-19 quarantine, and so we really saw a huge response from the community. We've brought on about 50 new families spread over dogs, cats, and what we call critters, which would be like bunnies, guinea pigs, things like that. But we have over 100 more families waiting in the wings for us to have time to do additional orientations and get them the information and resources that they need to be foster families with us, add them to our foster pool, all of that kind of stuff. So
So you said 50, you brought on 50 new families, correct?
about 50 new families, yeah.
And what it sounds like it's a like there's a pretty complex process for screening foster families. So what does it take to become a foster family or a foster? And has that changed? And what should people know if they're in that queue, waiting to hear back from you?
So, I mean, every shelter is different. Definitely, if you're interested in fostering, I would say reach out to your local shelter and see what their requirements are. For us, basic requirements are that you have to be 18 or older. You have to have your own health insurance. You either have to own, or if you rent, you have to have permission from your landlord. And you have to sign a few waivers just saying, mostly like a zoonotic disease waiver, saying that you understand that there are certain diseases that animals carry that are contagious to people. You also have to attend an orientation. Um, in the past, that has always been in-person, on-campus orientations followed by a tour of the shelter. We are now doing Zoom orientations, and we'll do tours again eventually, but not right now. And after you attend the online orientation, you get sent a volunteer orientation, a foster volunteer manual that has all the information that we went over in the orientation, but also additional resources and emergency contact information. Um, Once you've done all that, you get your email added to our email group. You get entered into our computer system. We use a program called PetPoint that we keep all of our information in, and you wait for us to send emails out about animals that are looking for foster.
If what do you think it's important for people to know about the work that you're doing and how it's being affected and the challenges that you're facing? And I'll move to another cute critter.
Um, so the first thing I would say is that if you've already reached out to a shelter and you haven't gotten a response, it's not that they don't need you. It's just that even though most of the people in the country right now feel like life has slowed down, I think for some people, life is just as busy and chaotic as it ever has been or worse. I know people who they do fancy things with computers that I'm not tech savvy enough to know about. And for them, I think they're getting slammed. Um, so I think the need is still out there, but the ability to get to that information and process it and then find you an animal that fits your home might be delayed. And the other thing I'll say about that is that the need is not going to end after the quarantine is over. If you live in the Northeast, it's probably going to be even greater than it is now because the Southern transport partner groups that we work with are going to be banging down our doors to get the animals to us that we haven't been able to take during this time period. So we might actually have a greater need for foster families after the quarantine is over than we have right now. So definitely don't get discouraged if the response time is delayed. And then the other thing I'll say is that if you are not interested in fostering because it doesn't work for your lifestyle, but you do still want to help, definitely check out like your shelter's like Amazon wish list or maybe like transport groups that operate in your area. Like there's a variety of ways to get involved that might not be direct animal care, but definitely the need is out there.
And if you are interested in fostering because your life has slowed down, what would you say to somebody who may go back to a full-time job or who may be thinking that they want to foster now, but have that be because they're home now? What should they be considering or what should they be thinking about when it comes to going back to quote unquote life as usual?
The foster needs that exist are so varied. Like the reason that an animal would need to go into foster is medical, behavioral, situational, transport, quarantine. There's so many different reasons. So even if you're able to foster right now 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and that's great, you can take an animal into your home long term, but you can't do that in the future. It doesn't mean that you can't be a helpful foster family in the future. Um, one thing that's really, really important is shelter breaks. Like if you just want to take an animal from Friday to Sunday, that might work for your shelter if they have an animal who really could use a break from being in that environment. So just because you can help now doesn't mean you might not be able to help later on, even if your schedule changes. And also, helping now makes you a great advocate for the animals that you're fostering. Like, so many of the animals that we've sent to foster never came back to the shelter because they got adopted by friends of the foster family or family members of the foster family. Like, once they're out in the community and people can see them in their natural environment, they just become such better adoption candidates, they end up not needing to come back.
That's really beautiful. And something that I had not realized is that there are sort of levels or grades of fostering. So if you have, like you're saying, if you have a weekend available, but you don't feel like you could foster for several months, then maybe depending on the resources or the facilities in your area, that might be an option for you or your family.
Yeah, and fostering nationwide is so varied. There are larger scale shelters in the South where you don't have to go through any of what you go through with our shelter to become a foster. There are actually shelters where you can walk in and say, I'd like to foster a dog for a few days, and they pair you with a dog and away you go. So it really depends on where you are and what they're set up to do.
So if you're in some part of the country and you want to find out more, where are some places that people could look, or some search terms they might use to educate themselves about how they could help?
So definitely figure out what your local contracting shelter is. It's different all over the state. Sometimes it's just an ACO officer and a few animals. Sometimes it's an absolutely massive shelter. Sometimes there's private shelters that are not necessarily contracted to a town, but just typing in the name of your town and animal shelter is the way to find out where those are. But if you're more interested in like learning about animal behavior or how to welcome a foster animal into your home, and you're like, I have a dog and a cat, I don't think I could do it, I don't know what that would look like, and you want to just do some of your own research on how to bring foster animals into your home, there's a lot of resources you can use. And I'm going to see if there's a way that I can actually put some into the chat here.
And if you can do that, I'll make sure that they get added to the any information that we might disseminate. And in the meantime, here's another cute little animal. Look at that. That is a precious pumpkin.
That's Lady. She was a very special pup. So let me see. I've been using Zoom a lot more than this. Is there the ability for me to start chat and paste?
Yes, there
Or is
is.
that okay?
So there is a chat function.
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
I do.
Cool.
All right. All right, so I put in there ASPCA Pro is, they have so much information. It's a lot of times targeted at professionals, but it's good for everybody. They have medical information, behavior information, dogs, cats, everything you could think of. And then the link above that is more sort of resources on animal behavior. And I think it's called the Dumb Friends Animal League, I believe. It's kind of a silly name. But yeah, there we go. So that's another, yeah, the Dumb Friends League is what it's called. But that's another one that has a lot of information in it as well.
And if you are interested in helping but can't necessarily commit to fostering even for a weekend, even when the pandemic is over, what are some things that your shelter is in particular need of, or what are some trends and what the needs are right now, and how can people support, given that we have to social distance from one another? And here's another precious animal.
So one of the things that's tough for us is that we depend almost exclusively on donations for a lot of things like food. And we are not accepting people's personal donations anymore. And we would get, I mean, we would get loads and loads of it every single day. We are only accepting donations of items shipped directly to us, like, for example, off of our wish list. So that's definitely something to look in that, you know, going on to your local shelter's website and seeing if they have any notifications about what resources they're short in or what is on their wish list would be super helpful. Um, is it, yeah, you got something to say? That's my pup.
Aw.
Um, and obviously, right now, it's a very low revenue time. Adoptions are still happening, but not as many. And also, a huge portion of our revenue is community events, events where we go out and we host gatherings or people come to the shelter for a wide variety of things, and we can't do any of those right now. So uh, generating revenue is really difficult for us, but we don't have fewer expenses. We still have the same number of people in-house and working from home to try and take care of the animals and keep everything in operation. So yeah, it's a tough time, I think, for us and probably for most shelters right now.
Yeah, and you were saying you have the same number of people, not to mention the same number of critters who need that support.
Yeah, and our numbers are a little bit lower right now because we're not transporting in, but our adoptions are lower too. So, and we still have, let's see, I looked it up. We still have right now 214 animals on campus and 135 in foster. So numbers are a little bit lower, but not hugely. So yeah, it's we're getting very creative in our uh, not myself personally, but a lot of people who work on that end of things are getting very creative in keeping us operational. And my organization has been awesome. Everybody's still full time. Nobody's been laid off and nobody's hours have been cut. So we're really fortunate. But yeah, it's definitely getting tricky.
So if people listening and watching want to support in more financial ways, then another thing that they could do is go to these, do a search on their town, including animal shelter, and then they'd see the local areas that, or the local shelters that need some assistance or likely need some assistance, given that they're probably experiencing the same kinds of things that,
Yeah,
that your place is.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
So. What have I not asked you that you think it's important for people to know? Here's another student.
Um, hmm. I think probably the thing that I touched on a little bit ago, where a lot of times when the initial like shock and awe wears off, people go back to their regular business. But I think for us, the time immediately after the end of the quarantine is going to be another really tough time as well. So people who can keep us in mind after everything returns to normal, and just maybe even put in some volunteer hours if they can't foster, or anything like that would be super helpful for sure.
So thinking about kind of along a continuum of being sequestered toward looking toward the future when we're not going to be sequestered, your needs will be the same, but the way people can help you meet those needs is going to change a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, helping us from a distance, maybe financially, or checking out those Amazon wish lists. And then later on, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, come and visit, go visit your shelter, see what kind of volunteer help they need, short-term fostering stints, advocating for the animals in your community. If your friend is fostering and they've got a really cute pup and you're able and allowed to take photos of them, post them on your Facebook page. People can see them, talk about how cute they are, all of that stuff.
Love it. Love it. So let's show one more picture
Oh, that's a
here.
good one to end on. One of my favorite
So
pups in the shelter ever.
that is
I don't have
adorable. And
favorites though.
yes, well, yes, I mean, everyone is a favorite. And we did have one question from the studio audience, which is, how many animals have you fostered? Because they are adorable.
Oh man. I don't know. Let's say 20 plus or minus so far. But in comparison to some of the foster families that I work with, I'm like way low on the numbers. There's families that work with us who have worked with us for years that I think are probably close to triple digits.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing. So uh, thank you so much for chatting
Thank
with us.
you.
I know I learned a couple things about how I could be of support, both in the time of the quarantine and also after. And I know all your little critter friends appreciate so much what you do. And personally, I'm happy that you have found something that gives you so much joy, because it really does seem to be your passion. And
For sure.
if you just look at these faces, you can understand why. I know we were going to end on that one, but let's end on this little pumpkin. So thank
He
you
was
so
one of
much.
my first fosters. That's
Oh,
Tucker.
that is
He's
Tucker. Well,
lovely.
he
Oh,
is
they're good.
precious. Oh, Kate said they're good. So, and one last thing, I know I keep saying we'll end. If people would like to contact you or the shelter that you work at to find out more information, where should they go?
It's arlgp.org.
Okay.
And if you click on if you're interested specifically in fostering, you can click on the volunteer tab, I believe it is. And fostering is under there. But you can also just poke around all over the website. There's all kinds of cool stuff on it. And there's even like resources for how to keep your kids entertained with like a booklet that we've made that has all kinds of fun pet related activities for kids to do, videos that have gone up from the Humane Ed department where they're reading stories to kids about animals. There's all kinds of resources on there, so you can just poke around.
I love it, and I'm probably going to go there as soon as we're done talking. So thank you again. I'll
Thank
turn us
you.
off.